Good evening. This is, good evening, everybody. This is the Committee of the Whole for January 6th, 2025. Happy New Year to all, and we're calling this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. And the first motion is to adopt the agenda. Motion comes forward from Deputy Mayor Fody, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that the agenda be adopted as circulated. Any discussion on the motion? I have no hands up. All in favor? All opposed? And we're carried. So before I'll ask for declaration of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Does anybody have an interest to declare? Go ahead, Councilor Deputy Mayor Foden.
Thank you, Your Worship. If we should get talking about anything to do with the fire department, I will declare a conflict.
Okay, fair enough. You had your hand up? No? Okay. I just wanted to make it known, there is an absence at the table. Councillor Mark Jameson has provided his resignation as of December 31st. Very sad to see him go, and we will be moving forward with the process as laid out by the Municipal Act in the next MEX council meeting. So very sad to see him go, but we will continue on. Next item is in camera. There is no in camera this evening, and there's obviously no reporting out from in camera, no delegations, presentations, and we'll move on to staff reports, which is 7.1, which is the 2025 draft water and wastewater operating capital budgets. So I will read the motion. It's a long one, bear with me. Moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Deputy Mayor Fody, that the Committee of the Whole receive Corporate Services Report 2024-032-2025 draft water and wastewater operating and capital budgets, that the Committee of the Whole receive the 2025 proposed water operating budget of $376,100, that the Committee of the Whole receive the 2025 proposed wastewater operating budget of $354,400, that the Committee of the Whole receive the water wastewater capital budget of $3.3 million sorry, you'd think I was out of practice here. $3,320,100, and that the 2025 water wastewater operating capital budgets be presented as referred to the January 13th, 2025 council meeting for consideration, and that the Committee of the Whole recommends that council approve increases to water and wastewater rates accordance to the rate study effective for the January 2025 billing cycle. So the motion is on the floor, and we will turn this over to staff to go over our water and wastewater operating capital budgets. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Welcome back, everybody. So we're going to go over the water and wastewater. I'm going to go through the slides, and Director Holiday's here as well to answer any specific questions on the operations of water and wastewater, because I would not have those answers. He's also here to provide any more further detail on the capital project specifically therein. Water and wastewater, this is tab 5 in the binder, and then the capital plan is tab 9 for those following along. Oh, you're back at the beginning. Slide 110, please. So the 2025 operating budget for water and wastewater, overall, the budget is about $730,000, which is an increase of about $42,000 or 6% from 2024. This is primarily covered off through the proposed increase in user fees, as well as some increase in other revenue. And I'll speak to that in a bit, but other revenue is basically the deposit interest held on the water and wastewater bank account. So in terms of operating, the key operating changes for 2025. So overall, water is up about $22,000 overall. This is covered through the proposed increase in rates of 3.5%, which I'll talk on the next slide, and the increase in other revenue, like I mentioned, which is deposit interest. The Aqua contract is up slightly, which is based on our contract, which uses September CPI to provide an increase. So there's a small increase there. The other big increase in 2025 in water is estimated $20,000 for a water and wastewater rate study. That would be their share of it. So in 2025, we do need to perform a rate study, which will set the rates beginning in 2026. So 2025 is the last year of the previous rate study. So we that's the big project coming for water and wastewater, is to set the rates going forward and starting in 2026. In terms of wastewater, wastewater is up about $21,000 overall. Again, this is covered through the increase in the rates of 3.5%, as well as some interest increase in the deposit interest. In terms of expenses, there's the nominal increase in the Aqua contract. Their maintenance expense through Aqua projects is up about $38,500, and a big part of that that includes $25,000 for a Zyme trial. And if people have questions specifically on what a Zyme trial is, I'm sure Director Holiday can speak to that. The other big increase, like water, is their half of the rate study, which is $20,000. So overall, we're estimating about $40,000 for the rate study. And then that is partially offset through the decrease in the transfer to the reserve funds for the wastewater. I don't know if Dave wanted to speak to the Zyme trial specifically, since that's the major increase for next year.
Sure, thank you. Through your worship, it's Anti-Zyme. The Anti-Zyme project is a natural organic product that we add to the lagoons. It's broadcast, and it breaks down the organic material within the lagoons and actually increases our capacity. So within the sludge that you find in the lagoons, most of it is organic compound, and this chews that up to increase our capacity of the lagoons, which we think will help with our capacity of the lagoons in the long run. So it's something that we want to do a trial of, that Aqua has recommended, and they feel that there's good value in doing this.
Does anybody have questions in regards to this? Councillor Maybe?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. So is this a one-year trial or is it a multi-year trial?
Through your worship. So initially, it's when you start up this product, it's like intense when you start, and then it's more of a maintenance thereafter. So if we find that we're seeing the benefit, then it's something that'll get rolled into the operating as we continue on, but it wouldn't be at the same level as initially starting it up.
And follow up, would there be more agitation to the ponds than what is presently there to help assist this study?
So it's broadcast, so they would disperse this. I think they said from a vehicle or from a boat. They'll go in. There's no additional agitation with this. It's something that is broadcast, spread throughout the lagoon, and will find its way to where it needs to break it down.
Kind of an enzyme type thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions in regards? Go ahead, Councillor Lackey.
Through you, your worship, to the director, you alluded to if it's successful, it's ongoing. Do we know what its ongoing cost may be year after year? Do we have any projections?
Yes, they did provide us a brief estimate. I think it was about the $8,500 per year mark. It wasn't a large expense in terms of the maintenance of the lagoon itself. And what it does, it saves us from having to excavate the material out if we're able to break that material down. So it lengthens the time that the lagoons will be in operating order before we have to drain them out and excavate them out.
Deputy Mayor Fody, go ahead.
Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, our Director of Operation. Is there a percentile measurement on the expectation of the reduced? Well, how is it calculated? I guess maybe is a better word.
So through your worship, they come in and they do a sample of the sludge material that's in the lagoon. So we don't know exactly at this point until they come in and do that initial sampling. But their estimates are somewhere around the 25 to 32% of the organic compound will be broken down. Yeah.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Counselor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. Just a follow-up. So with the potential expansion of the lower part of Lansdowne, will this help increase or decrease the construction needs of another lagoon or increase capacity of those present lagoons with this possible enzyme treatment?
Through your worship. There's several factors with our lagoons currently. Obviously, the organic compound within there is taking up some of the capacity. Every time we have a rainfall, the storm water is entering into the sanitary system as well through, people's homes and other means of infiltration. So there are several factors that we need to consider for increasing the capacity. We are seeing that there is a large increase on storm events as an example, but certainly this will remove a lot of the organic compound that is in the lagoons and create additional capacity that way as well. Yes.
Go ahead, Counselor Lackey.
Thank you, Worship, through you. This is getting to the outside of the box, but I know in past years, there were a few large municipalities in Western Ontario that pelletized the human waste and used it for agricultural purposes. Number one, is that still something that's being done in the province? And if so, is there an opportunity to have some of that lagoon waste shipped to one of these units one of these municipalities who's doing this?
Through your worship. I've never heard of the pelletizing that you're talking about. We would have to update our ECA in order to be able to accomplish something like that. And I know historically we had the spray system in the fields, and we've come away from that. But certainly our ECA does limit what we're able to do with the material that comes out of the lagoon. An example, when I first came here, the lagoons were excavated, and working with MECP, we were able to take that material that we excavated up to the waste site after testing it and use that as interim cover material. There's still some of it sitting at the Lansdowne waste site currently. So when we excavate, that is something that we do, but certainly can look into the pelletization as well too.
I have a question. So you actually partially answered it when you talked about when you first came here. We were just cleaning out the lagoons at that point in time. How often on average do the lagoons have to be cleaned out? And with this mechanism to break down the organic matter, how many extra years will it add to us not having to do that? In estimates time. I realize it's not a finite science.
Thank you. When I came, only the one cell was cleaned out. There's the secondary cell that has not been cleaned out yet, and that's where we're looking to focus the effort with this Antizyme product to try to break this down. But also at the same time, the one that was cleaned out enter into the maintenance schedule to try to keep everything knocked down. I don't know exactly myself how often it has been done historically here, but certainly this will extend the life, and they don't know at this point how long. It's still fairly new.
And just for that particular product, I'm assuming because it's a natural process, it's not contamination or, it's not a chemical process, it's a natural process because it's enzymes, correct?
That is correct. It is a natural process.
Okay. Any other comments or questions in regards to water, wastewater operating? Back in your hands, Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Next slide. So for 2025, these are the proposed user rates for 1.5-inch meters or less, which is primarily the majority of our users, and the 2-inch meter or greater. These proposed increases follow the last rate study. So it's a 3.5% increase to the base rates, and then just over 1% on the consumption volume if you were to go over. So in the base rates, the monthly charge that includes 15 cubic meters of water in that base rate. Overall, the consumption charges is about 6.5% of the total revenue. So the vast majority of users, they're paying the base rate that includes the 15 cubic meters. monthly. So those are the proposed rates in accordance with the last rate study. And then just for a comparison, we added the next slide this year just to compare where the water rates compare to our neighbors, similar to the taxes. So you can see the green one there is the 2024 rate, and then the red one is the proposed. So it's going up about $6 a month overall. And this is comparing for 15 cubic meters, what you'd be paying in similar towns. It's pretty hard sometimes to find this comparable information. Not every municipality makes it clear and available, but just to provide some context of where our current rate sits in comparison to some others. So again, this is what 15 cubic meters a month would cost in these other townships. And that's it for operating. If there's any further questions.
Any questions for treasurer? Okay, I'll move on.
Okay, so we'll go over the water and wastewater capital. The complete 10-year financial plan is appendix or tab 9 in the binder. But overall, for the 2025 proposed capital, including projected carry forward, is about 3.3 million in 2025. The vast majority of this relates to the water storage and distribution system upgrade, which was in the 24 budget and is being carried forward. And it's actually a multi-year budget. So there's 3.15 million in 25, but overall there's some money in 20. If you look on the financial plan, there's money in 25 and 26. Overall, that project's about $4.5 million. And then the big expenditure in wastewater is to carry forward to complete the sanitary municipal class environmental. And then that just shows the funding there. So primarily funded through the reserve funds outside of the water storage and distribution system upgrade. There's some proposed debt funding there, and we've applied for the HUSIF grant for that project. And Director Holiday could speak more to the specifics of that project.
Questions? Go ahead, Counselor, maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to the Director of Planning. So the new storage tank, and I think we talked about this before, is unless we get a grant or some sort of money gift from somewhere, we will not be going ahead with this because we're not going to bite that one all on our own, will we?
Through your worship, the Lansdowne water is one that I think needs to be done whether we get funding or not, unfortunately. With the issue being identified that we're currently not meeting the standards required for firefighting services, plus the potential growth, it's one that it's a bit of a risk at this point. So we would have to proceed with that one. So this is just the water project and not the Lansdowne Village urbanization project. Yeah.
So sorry, just the additional storage tank as noted over by the wells. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just to add to that, so I was going to speak to it in just a little bit, but so in saying that, if we aren't successful with that grant and had to go forward with that, without the grant, that 3.3 million that we currently have in the budget is hopefully grant funded, equates to about 188,000 annually in additional potential debt servicing cost, and that would all have to get factored into that rate study we'd be doing this year for going forward.
Just to follow up, so that has to come back out of the users.
Yes, the user rates fund the capital as well as the operating in the system. So that 10-year capital projection, that all gets factored into the rates that would be proposed through this rate study.
And it can support it.
We don't know yet because the rate study hasn't been done.
But part of getting a water license is that we have to have a financially viable system, and we have to demonstrate that through our rate study.
Okay.
I have the CAO who wants to say something.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. Just so everybody's on the same page with this. If we're successful with HUSIF, we will be coming back to council to look at the agreement and look at our funding options and all that stuff. So this isn't a one and done, you know, if this passes, that we've got the green light to do whatever. Okay? If we're unsuccessful with the HUSIF, so if we're successful, we're coming back to council. If we're unsuccessful, we're coming back to council to figure out, well, what's plan B here? So again, if council approves the budget, it's not that we are taking this as the green light to go and do this project one way or the other. We will be back before council regardless. Well, you got it on a public record now, so may as well be, right?
Right, she just wrote it down. I guess, sorry, I'll ask if there's any other questions before. Sorry, my apologies to the people watching. I guess what I'm hearing around the table, obviously, this is a very large project and very costly one. One of the, there's already a motion on the floor currently, so I'm asking that maybe council mull around putting another motion on the floor in regards to that funding that we may or may not get from the province, potentially the feds, in regards to upgrading these systems. And that could be considered after this motion is dealt with. Just because, to the point that Councillor Lackey just made, a resolution or a motion that basically indicates that council is supportive of the project but will not move forward without assistance from either provincial or federal or both in the future to upgrade these things, or can't, I should say. I guess that's maybe staff. We would have to wordsmith that, but there's already a motion on the floor. I'm just saying that I can sense the hesitation in regards to all of this. And while there's certain things we have to do in order to maintain the system, it doesn't make sense for us to do one thing and have roads opened up and what have you in order to facilitate the growth in the village. So just maybe something for council's consideration that they can put on the floor after we deal with the motion that's already on the floor. Okay. Further questions in regards to the capital budget that's been presented? I have no hands up. So, Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just to go over the 10-year water wastewater financial plan. So this slide here kind of shows from 2025 to 2034. So over that span, there's proposed approximately 13.3 million in total capital projects, which is about 4.9 for water and about 8.4 under wastewater. And it just shows the funding strategy there. So you can see underwater over the 3 years that total $4.5 million would be 1.2 through proposed debt, and then the other 3.3 hopefully through the HUSIF grant. And then so just going forward, just to look at the reserve fund continuities for water and wastewater. Under the water reserve fund, so over the 10 years, it's projected to increase from about 700,000 now to just under $1 million. And you can see there the green line in every year other than 2029 outpaces the red line. So the green line is the contribution and the red line is pulling out for various capital projects. And I just want to remind everyone, the reserve contributions in water and wastewater, it's the residual amount remaining from the operating budget. So we have our revenue, we have the operating budget. The difference, that's what we put in the capital reserve funds each year. It's that residual amount. So it does fluctuate based on things from year to year, but based on the 10-year, that's there. So it does grow. In saying this, it does grow over the 10 years, but as we've kind of spoken, if we are unsuccessful in that HUSIF grant, that reserve fund can get spent very quickly to cover off that potential $3.3 million. So this is kind of a best case scenario in that sense, but that's where the reserve fund otherwise would be healthy. And I would also say when we do the rate study in 25, that factors in existing reserve funds as well. So they'll look at our current level of reserve fund in water and wastewater, and that all gets factored into the future rates and how they're proposed going forward. So all that's considered.
Go ahead, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, through you, your worship. And just to understand that, Phil, the debt of $1 million plus is assumed by the water and wastewater users, and therefore the interest that's paid on that, it is not included in the
Tax funding. budget.
capital, the non-water capital.
No, it's 100% within the user rates. The water rates would pay for it.
Okay.
So in that 10-year plan to service that debt, the potential debt as right now is about 1.2 million,
Mhm.
which is about a $70,000 annual fee. That's built into that 10-year plan going forward. And that's factored into that. So yes, the water rates would fund the interest and the principal on any debt for water capital projects.
Okay, and just for clarity, I think topping up on what Counselor was saying earlier, if we didn't, there's a possibility we don't get use of funding for this project. And what happens then? I'm sorry, I was maybe not paying enough attention. If we didn't get funding for 73%, which is my understanding, what happens?
I believe that Steve said it the best, that if we're not successful with the use of fund, we will come back to council.
Well,
Well, we'll
We're
come
not
back.
moving
we're
ahead
coming
with
back to
anything.
council even if we are successful, because we'll need a bylaw authorizing us to sign the funding agreement. We'll need a bylaw authorizing us to incur the debt on behalf of the water wastewater system. And so this is far from being over.
So really, sorry, did you want to continue on? Go ahead.
In that this was presented to us as being absolutely necessary because of fire underwriter services, because the fire department came down here and took our drinking water to put a fire out. There's two angles, two externalities coming in here. One is the fire service and the other is this need for growth. So I'm a little confused how it would strike me that those two are pointing toward it as a must do. I don't understand how in the future it's going to be, oh, don't worry, we don't have to do this. And it strikes me as from those 2 points of view, if the fire service is demanding this thing, that's the way it was sold to me.
So I'm going to go back to the director and the director can answer that. So because we're talking, to your point, we're talking about.
Am I on the right project?
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about fire servicing and we're talking about growth but they're tied together because we're not going to do one piece and not the other type thing. So I'll leave it to the director to speak to that.
Yes, thank you. The project that we're designing currently accommodates both the fire requirements and our short and medium term growth requirements at the same time. We're not looking at one in isolation of the other. We're looking at this as the big picture. When we do this, we need to make sure that we're satisfying the requirements from both angles, from firefighting service and also from having growth to be able to afford the system that in the village of Lansdowne.
And the growth that we're discussing here, to be perfectly clear, is the East Lansdowne project south of the railway tracks, plus a few fill-ins in the village, correct? So that's for I want to be perfectly clear, that's for the 91 residential units that we've approved on the East Lansdowne project. And is that too difficult a question? It's not for the 200 residentials. Am I right in saying that? It just takes us to the 91 that we approved. I'm just curious because I get confused because it's very confusing as to when we talk about future growth. The only future growth we've approved is 91 residential units down there. And again, fill in here, whatever that is, 16 or so units. And so this water just takes us to that level, or does it take us beyond that?
Through your worship, so this growth, that what we're looking to construct with this project will get us the 91 proposed lots that is currently at pre-approval, like, I'm not sure what the stage is with the county.
Draft plan.
Plus the additional, it's taking into consideration Bill 21 for the additional growth, 3 units per property. We've-
Secondary suites.
Secondary suites, thank you. All of that has been taken into consideration. It was all outlined in the JL Richards memorandum report. We have 12 Garden Street. We have the property directly south of us here that's been taken into consideration. Any property within the village boundary that is considered developable has been included as part of the short term, because that's what
Thank
we
you.
have
That's
to
the
consider.
way I remember it. Thank you. I just want to be very clear. We're not talking 200 units south of the railway tracks,
Correct.
as was once presented to us. Remember, and it got dialed.
Because
into
we
a-
only have water
Because we only,
supply.
but this is what we need to do in order to facilitate that level of development.
It's to satisfy the short-term requirements that have been identified in the memorandum provided by JL Richards.
Okay.
But what we're looking at is something that is scalable. That as we continue to grow,
Mhm.
the system can continue to grow with us.
And that's, as we talked about, putting more vertical
Yeah.
units on it.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, we're on the same page. So I have Counselor Lackey and then I've got Deputy Mayor Fode. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to you to expand a little bit, I think, on Councillor Grell's, the relationship between our expansion for residential and our fire. If this is also a requirement because we don't meet a fire standard of some sort, because it's to be funded by the users only. The fire department being a user, should that not be a trigger for some funding from general coffers to help with that project?
I'm gonna go to the treasurer. with
Yeah,
that
through you,
question.
Mayor. So I think as part of the next rate study, we can definitely look at a consumption charge, whether you call it a bulk water user or some kind of charge like that, and we could set up an internal recovery. So in essence, if the fire department is pulling water out of there for whatever purposes, it would be an internal recovery, similar to what we do with the building department and charging them essentially rent for this building, so the building rate. We could set up an internal cost recovery for when fire uses that, come up with a rate, internally charge that rate to the taxpayers essentially, and that would be an alternative revenue source within the water and wastewater system for sure.
Go ahead.
So is it or is it not a requirement of the fire department to have this extra capacity?
Director?
Yes, for it's a requirement for the firefighting within the system itself. The system is supposed to be a sustainable system that not only provides safe drinking water for the residents, but also does address the firefighting requirements for that system as well.
Okay. And now I have Deputy Mayor Fode.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. My question is back to Councillor Grell's comments about the fire department. From what I understand, the fire department weighs in on this water system more so to loop the dead ends because of lack of pressure when they're tapping into these hydrants. The pressure just doesn't sustain the needs of today's fire equipment. Is that correct?
Director?
Through your worship. Well, it's kind of like that. The requirement is that we're supposed to maintain a certain pressure after a 2-hour event. So if there's a 2-hour event, we're supposed to have a minimum pressure of X liters per second. And currently we do not meet that at certain nodes within the system. By us doing two sections of looping, we're not rebuilding the entire system or upgrading pipes. By just looping 2 sections of the system, we're able to achieve that. So that's what's been identified with the modeling that's been completed.
And excuse me, if I may, a follow-up question. Those 2 loops are the one on King Street through to Frederick. Is that true? And then the other loop is right there below the water tower on the main line.
Counselor Fody,
Yes.
not to preempt the conversation, but you had made a conflict of interest in regards to fire earlier on.
You're right, but my conflict of interest, just for conversation's sake, and you're correct. Thanks for correcting me on that. Is more to do with money to the fire department as it pertains to employees. But it's hard to differentiate. So you're right. If it's to do with fire, I should recuse myself
Well,
because you won't be able to have one conversation with the other, right?
yeah, I just didn't want anybody to get themselves too far down a path here. So,
I'll make it easy. I will step out on a fire discussion.
okay, so with water, wastewater, is there any further questions about capacity for development? If not, is there further comments or question in regards to fire capacity? If so, I'll ask Councillor or Deputy Mayor Fody to step out. I'll ask you to step out because I think I do have a question. And I'll ask you to step out so that, yes, please. And then I'll ask the question. So what I guess my question is regards to what's been asked by Councillor Lackey and Councillor Grell. The capacity for pressure and storage is a firefighting issue as much as a capacity for growth.
That is correct.
To the point that was made in regards to funding and not just to the ratepayers on the system, how is that calculated? I guess I am unclear on that. As far as you were talking about chargebacks and potentially.
Yeah, so going forward, we haven't traditionally done it, but we could set it up where when the fire does use water out of it, they would pay a per cubic meter rate.
I'm not so, obviously the user fee makes sense to me, but I'm talking about capital. I'm talking about capital because, for example, not to pick on anybody, but when the fire that happened on the farm outside of the village took all or most of the water capacity, they don't pay any water, wastewater. So the greater area around the settlement boundary for firefighting services, would that be it? I would assume you guys would come here, and this is a question for the chief. You would be coming here to get water. So paying for the water is one thing, but having to being, and chief, correct me, fire shuttle services, how many kilometers from hydrant?
Sorry, through your worship. Not sure that there's,
I thought there was a radius if
so
you're
we have
within-
we have an 8 kilometer radius from a fire station for
Yes.
tanker
yeah,
shuttle
service.
services.
But what I'm thinking is that if you are a homeowner that lives west of the village and you're within, let's 8 kilometers of that fire hydrant or that water tower that sticks up here, I'm assuming your insurance rates are better because you're within a certain radius of a fire hydrant and access to water, sort of like the tanker shuttle service. So I guess the bottom line and the question that Councillor Grell is nodding his head at me, what, if any, contribution does the general taxpayer make to the use of the water storage for firefighting? Capital, sorry, thank you. Capital cost to put the storage facility in place. Director.
Thank you through your worship, or to your worship. I think it would be similar to like the city of Kingston that has a bulk water filling station and pool companies that come and use water from the water tower. You know, it's a similar situation as the fire department coming in and loading the tanks to go and fight a fire. When the user rate study is completed, the rate would be set on a contribution of that money going towards capital reinvestment for the system. So when we're setting that rate, it's not just, you know, to recoup the cost of the water that's being taken. It's also for future growth and requirement of the system as well. So there'd be a factor, I would assume, looking at the
In the
Director of
rate
Finance,
study.
within the rate study that would contemplate that.
Right, but it still doesn't address the fact that the capital cost is borne by the ratepayers. And I realize,
Yeah, so if we work in a bulk water rate, or bulk water haulage rate, whatever you want to call it, part of setting that rate study, they would have a projection of how many cubic meters bulk water users would use in any given year. You build that into the rate. Part of building that rate is to fund capital projects within that project, right? So it gets factored into it in that sense. If you know what
Okay.
if you know what I'm saying.
so I have Counselor Lackey and then I'll go to Counselor Garrell.
Through
Sorry.
you, your worship, it sounds like we're talking about operating again. The rate study to me is going to give us at the end of the day, a monthly amount to charge or to be charged to the residents. So getting back to the mayor's comment, what about the capital project?
Yes, so through Madam Mayor, so in setting the rate study, they'll look at it over the horizon of the rate study, what the projected operating costs are for each year, plus what the capital expenses are over that same horizon. It's the total cost of that, and then they'd be looking at, they use both combined to set the rates,
Capital's included in that.
including that in that total expense. And then when they look at it to set the rates, they would know how many cubic meters are available, and then you break it down into, the residential users or the 1.5-inch meters, the 2-inch meters, the bulk water haulers, which we could fall under, our fire department could be classified as that. And then you break it down into what each is using, and then you propose rates based on that.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Counselor Garrell now.
Thank you. So here we have in front of us documents with numbers, and yet we're talking about the possibility and maybe the likelihood of having to, use the word, sever off a chunk of the initial capital expenditure, not the rate study, but the immediate $3 million that's right in front there. How could we rewrite or add a statement that says we are going to address the fact that part of this came about because the fire department felt there needed to be, I shouldn't say the fire department, I should say it was felt generally by council that there needed to be, to meet the fire underwriter service, and the possibility exists that it could be used outside of the boundaries of the village. So what responsibility is there, and how do we perhaps write it into this, saying that we have to look at that? We can't just say, oh, if they're going to use a liter of water. No. They should possibly, we have to concern ourselves with, regardless of the amount of water used, or in addition to, there has to be a contribution to that capital
From the fire, but
from the levy outside of the water.
Okay.
That's where I'm trying to go.
I have this-
Outside of that levy. The way it's encapsulated now, we're just toying with the idea, oh, don't worry, they'll use some water. I'm sure you will. But the rate study, it's going to be, so much for gallons or whatever. But going forward, that would address it. I just think that we need to consider the fact that that's the way it was sold to me, sold to this council. So therefore, do we not own a responsibility to, from outside of the rate there, do we not have a responsibility to kick in some money on the capital side, regardless of if they didn't use a liter of water?
okay, that's.
I'm
something
not
to
sure how to
consider.
handle that, but that's what I'm
So-
saying. Regardless of the amount of water used, should there be something put in there outside of the water
Ratepayers.
ratepayer?
Okay,
Thank you.
so I'm gonna go to the CAO.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the fire department as a water customer. And they're not, a house that flushes toilets every day and uses drinking water and all that sort of stuff. As there is an emergency, and, I hope and pray that there isn't a use that the fire department has to do, where they have to draw water from the system to put out somebody's house. But it's a very much extraordinary measure, right? When the fire department goes out, even though they have, what are you up to, 9 calls already this year? It happens every day, but they aren't a regular user of the water system. If we want to consider a bulk rate for them when they do it, okay, fine. As people have noted, part of that rate, that's whatever it's, $1 for a liter of water, let's just pick a number. Part of that dollar is for the operating of the system, but part of it is also allocated for the capital. So they're already, if we're doing a bulk rate for the fire department, they're already contributing to capital. So now we're going to step outside and say, okay, they're going to do that, but they're also going to contribute X number of dollars for the capital outside of all of this. So you're basically putting, and that's going to come from some reserve fund of the township. So that's putting the burden of that system on the bigger township, right? Which in the past, we've had discussions around this horseshoe about, well, why are residents at large paying for things that are happening only in Lansdowne, that are affecting only people in Lansdowne? I just want to draw people's attention to that. I mean, ultimately it's council's decision, but we've had that come up time and time again. So it's just a consideration. I don't know if you want to get into it tonight. The rate study that's coming up will factor in what the rate's going to be given whatever level of debt we're going to have to incur for the system that benefits Lansdowne. If they're drawing on water, the fire department, and going out and putting out fires outside of the system, then I think we're going down this slippery slope. Are we going to charge people for the water we put on their house? Congratulations, your house was a loss. Oh no, by the way, we used 10,000 gallons of water and here's your bill. I don't know if that's where we want to go, or again, that's for council's consideration, but I see the slope and I hope we don't misstep.
So I'm going to try to pin a bow on this, and then maybe we can have Councillor or Deputy Mayor Fody back in. Regarding the firefighting or the fire underwriting service rules and regulations and what the expectations are, that's for the houses that are within the boundary as much as who might be outside. But I also note that our financial planning does not preclude the municipality at large to make a contribution for capital. It doesn't preclude us with that. For example, if we ended up with more money from the casino than what we had budgeted in revenue, we could allocate some of that towards the system to help offset the costs for the residents within the system. However, I'm trying to sort of bring us back in here. We've been asked to approve the water wastewater operating capital budgets for what needs to be done as presented by the fire chief, the director, and the treasurer. Having said that, even though this has been suggested that this needs to be done imminently, that no work would be done unless they came back to council to sign agreements and to move forward with additional funding. Is that correct, Mr. CAO? Okay. So I just wanted to draw that line so that everybody is on the same page, that even though this has been proposed to us and needs to be done, there's a further conversation about provincial and federal funding that we still need to have. But that we're being asked to approve this in principle so that they can continue on with moving things forward, asking for funds, and getting to that point. Okay? You have a comment there? Go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Very quick one, Madam Mayor. And also with that comeback for the ask, whether we grant it or whatever, maybe what we were talking about, excuse me, with the fire participating somehow or the general population, and maybe have that conversation at that time too, because we're going to decide one way or the other how we're going to fund this anyway. So
It would be interesting to see how other communities do it.
Yes.
As well. If there's other communities that charge that bulk rate, that sort of thing. Maybe in Loyalist,
Through Mayor. So most communities that offer bulk water would have a bulk water hauler rate, as Director Holiday said. A common use is companies that fill swimming
Pools.
pools commercially, things like that. And typically the bulk water charge is much more than, like right now, when you see the residential one, it's $1 something for cubic meter over the 15 you get a month. Typically the bulk water rate's much more than that. It factors into that because they're not really paying the base rate, they're paying a straight volume charge. So it's a bulk water charge is very common. But
okay. Well, and that can be factored into the water rate study that's going to happen as well. So, okay. Does anybody have any other questions in regards to the water, wastewater operating capital budgets? Seeing none, I'll call Terry back in. Deputy Mayor Fode? Okay. So the motion that is on the floor, your presentation is, are you?
that's the end of the water. I always throw this slide on here. It's just reinforcing again what the CAO has said, that just to remind council that policy is really a policy document. To enact many of the measures within the budget, we still have to come back for bylaws, council approvals, council resolutions. It's not an end. So I always like to remind council of that.
Okay, any further slides, or is that your presentation complete?
That is complete.
Okay, so the motion that is on the floor, moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Deputy Mayor Fode, that the Committee of the Whole receive Corporate Service Report 2024-032-2025, draft water and wastewater operating and capital budgets, and that the Committee of the Whole receive the 2025 proposed water operating budget of $376,100, that the Committee of the Whole receive the 2025 proposed wastewater operating budget $354,400, and that the Committee of the Whole receive the water and wastewater capital budget of $3,320,100, that the 2025 water and wastewater operating and capital budgets be presented, be referred to the January 13th, 2025 council meeting for consideration, that the Committee of the Whole recommends that council approve increases to the water and wastewater rates in accordance with the rate study effective for the January 2025 billing cycle. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I will call the question on the motion. All those in favor? All those opposed, and it is carried. Okay. So next item.
Your worship.
Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Through you, your worship, we just had a slight discussion a little while ago. Do we need a motion furthering what we discussed earlier?
In regards to the funding from the
Yes,
province.
what we're
and
gonna
federal.
do with or without funding? Do we need something?
Okay, so I guess discussions or suggestions from staff in regards to how that might be worded, that it does well for you. And as well as how we might be approaching the provincial and federal governments in regards to financing for this. Not financing, sorry, funding. In that the council of the township. Yeah. So the council of the township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands. I'm grasping for words. I apologize. Acknowledges needs.
Sorry. Fast drafting makes bad resolutions.
Okay,
Can we just, we'll come back
we could
for
have a,
council with the motion and stuff?
okay.
Through your worship, this is committee of the whole, so
Oh, right.
if there is something that you want, because it won't be approved until the 13th.
Till the
So
13th.
if there is a motion that,
So it's almost like we're
council.
giving a notice of motion for next council
exactly,
meeting?
Yep.
We'll
and then
get
we
that
can draft.
sorted. Thank you for that, though.
Yep.
Okay. And that addresses that. So now we're back to operating and capital budgets for the township at large, the 2025, and the motion comes forward from Councillor Kelman, seconded by Councillor Correll, that the committee of the whole recommend that council receive corporate services report 2025-002-2025 municipal operating and capital budgets, and that the committee of the whole recommend that council approve the 2025 proposed operating budget with the net levy requirement of 12,869,100, and that the committee of the whole recommend that council approve the 2025 proposed township residential tax rate of 0.005391115, and that the committee of the whole recommend that council approve the 2025 proposed capital budget of 14,889,100. Okay, motion is on the floor, and staff, you have brought back some additional information for us to digest. And just for everyone's knowledge, county has come forward with their budget as of last Friday. County budget is estimated to come in at 5.1, and our treasurer has calculated what the overall tax rate would be depending on what the discussion results in this evening. So the treasurer has those details as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So yes, with our updated operating tax rate based on council's direction of scenario 2 for the police addendum, that lowered the township's tax rate increase to 6.8. With the county coming in at 5.11, the overall tax rate increase would be 5.2%. From last year. So for a median residential assessment of $206,000, the overall tax bill would be $2,355 for the year, which is an increase of about $116 over last year. So about $10 a month, or about $5 for every 100,000 in assessment is the overall increase based on the county's proposed rate.
Can I also ask for some context in regards to the lack of phase-in and how that might have affected this, should it still be in play?
Yeah, everyone's favorite topic. So our last phase-in assessment cycle was ended in 2020, which was the 2016 to 2020, which got to the 2016 values. Under that phase-in cycle, the township here averaged about 2.75%. So in saying that, without that phase-in assessment, we're down to about maybe a half a point with renovations and the one-offs here and there. So as previously discussed, that puts all the pressure for the increase specifically on the tax rate. So in saying that, we still have not received any direction on when any potential assessment update will happen. But yeah, under the last cycle, it was about a 2.75 average annually, which we don't have the benefit of, but.
Okay, I just wanted to have that noted on the public record. Do you have further information you'd like to share, treasurer, or?
I think at this point, it's really if council has any further questions on specific projects from December 12th. If there's capital projects or if there's operating that council wants to discuss, or.
Why don't we start with operating, if there's questions in regards to the operating budget, and then we'll move on to capital, because I know that Director Holiday has provided some slides in regards to the capital project, so we'll try to deal with the operating questions in regards to the operating budget, which would be pages.
Starts on tab 2, so page 5 is the high level.
Yep.
It's a little outdated now with the police addendum, but so it's gone from 7.3 down to 6.8. And with the budget or a levy requirement of just under 12.9 now. But
so the motion that has been put on the floor was assuming the option to
yes, the updated options, the updated motions are based on scenario 2 for the police budget addendum from December 12th.
And just to remind those watching at home, option 2 was to take the additional shy of 300,000 that we received from the provincial government to offset the increase to the OPP costing that was retroactive to 2020.
It was to cover the 2023 retroactive.
Right.
So addendum 2 or scenario 2 The original budget as proposed, we were proposing to use the working fund to cover the 2023 retroactive based on the provincial assistance. We no longer needed to use that working fund. And then scenario 2 also then proposed carrying forward 122,000 to the tax stabilization reserve fund to brace for the expected increase in 2026, which will include the 2026 base cost as well as another abnormally high retroactive adjustment for 2024 as based on the OPP contract they just signed with their union. So
So that's option 2, and that is baked into this motion that has been put on the floor.
correct.
Okay, just wanted it to be sure to, clear to council as well as the public. So questions in regards to the operating budget, any clarification? Go ahead, Councillor Lackey.
Sorry, your worship, I know it's been answered, but I have to ask again. Under temporary staffing, we have 182,004. Was that for consultants?
No, I don't
Through
believe so. Go
through you,
ahead.
Mayor. So that relates to a couple things. They're identifiable people.
I have it written down last week.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, consultants would be coming out of a reserve fund or contracted services. Thank you. That's all right. Further questions about operating? I'll give go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Can I have those numbers again with the county in there now at supposedly 5.1%? What final number did you say mixed with our proposal in scenario 2 would
Yep.
that come out to?
Through you, Mayor. So with the county coming in at 5.11% and us at the update at 6.8, and education is flat, that's confirmed. The overall residential tax rate is a 5.2% increase. For a median residential assessment of 206,000 as provided by MPAC, that would result in an annual tax bill overall of $2,355. Last year, that number would have been $2,239. So it's about $116 more on an annualized basis, or it's about
It's not quite $10.
about
month,
$6 a month.
and that's the whole bill.
That's the overall bill. So that's county, lower tier, us, and the education portion. That's the overall bill.
Go ahead.
If I may, thank you. Did you give a number likewise for option 1 and 2, or are we?
Not with the county factored in. If we went with scenario 1, I do have that. Scenario 1, which would have used all the OPP savings this year and not put anything away to brace for next year's impact, that would put the overall at 4.7 instead of 5.2. What that means on an annual bill, it'd be $2,344 versus $2,355. So we're talking $11 for the average residential assessment over the year, or about 90 cents a month to go down in that respect with scenario 1 compared to scenario 2.
And the percentage of that calculation?
The overall would be 4.7 rather than 5.2.
I have the CAO that wants to get in.
Thank you. But as Phil noted, if you go with option 1, we use up the full amount
Yep.
for the OPP.
Right.
And this year, when the OPP bill came in, it was 3% of our increase was allocated strictly for OPP.
Right.
So I think this was a one-time shot from the province because they surprised all the municipalities with these charges from the OPP. So they gave us the 77 million amongst all the OPP municipalities. And I think that's our one kick at the cat. Now they're going to look at it like, well, we've had a year to budget and plan for the next one. And we will be seeing another adjustment like we did. Normally we're seeing an annual adjustment of about $10,000 to $12,000 from OPP. This year it was 115. We're expecting to see that again because the 2024 adjustment doesn't take into account it'll take into account the other wage increase that the OPP got as well on top of everything.
Retroactive.
So if we go option 1, we're going to be back around this time next year saying, well, 3% of our budget is our proposed increase is going to be OPP.
I would just add, so with that the big impact for that 2023 adjustment, which made it 115 instead of the typical maybe 8 to 10, was that the collective agreement they just signed this year which was retroactive to the beginning of 2023, called for a 4.5% wage adjustment for 23. That agreement also called for 4% in 24. So that 4% is not baked into the bill we just paid in 24. So that's why I'm expecting a similar adjustment in 26 for 24. Like it's 0.5% less than that 4.5, but I would expect a similar abnormal. And then after 26 going on into 27, I would expect it to kind of stabilize and normalize again, because now they will have baked in that collective agreement into the rates. But that's why I'm expecting a similar 2024 adjustment in 26, because to pay for that 4% retroactive.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. Thank you, Mr. CAO. Any further comments or questions in regards to operating? Final call for operating. Go ahead, Councilor Brown.
In general terms, it's been pointed out to me that we sitting around this table as elected council people are not, we don't go line by line through the operating budget. So simple question, if we ask staff to go through that, could they come up with 1.5% reduction in that operating budget, line by line on your nickel, so
I
to
will-
speak?
I'll go to the CAO for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Worship, through you. We've been through the operating budget several times as a senior management team. I've cut, just speaking for the administrative
Saw that.
department, we're down 7.7%. Marnie's budget, similar. The fat is pretty much non-existent. If you want to start, if you're looking at that, then we're looking at cutting services. So that's a whole other discussion. And that's staffing levels, that's all that stuff. So if that's where things want to go, then we can go back and we can start doing that. But the residents are going to notice a difference. And I'm uneasy about this budget because if we have one thing that we haven't anticipated come up, we're back before council saying we got to draw from a reserve fund because we haven't built in cushion that we normally would. Not that we were padding our budgets. We try to run lean on things, but we have contingencies. I think, you know, my contingency fund which is my little safety net, keeps going down every year. And I'm at the point now where I'm twitchy about it. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed and hoping we have a quiet year and everything goes the way we hope it does, because there's not a lot of cushion.
Go ahead.
You may have misinterpreted my question because actually that's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear that you guys went over that with a fine tooth comb as best you could with your departments. And I know that's hard. That's a lot of paperwork in there. And you just answered the question that said you guys did as slick a job as you could to keep that low, to the point where you're a little nervous that down the road there might be a little hiccup in there. So that's basically what I wanted to hear, because it's not like we're going to sit around and say, yeah, knock 1.5% off it, but we have in the past. But we're not going to. And that answers that question for me.
Okay.
And I just needed to ask it.
The treasurer wants to say something
Yeah,
and then
no,
we'll go to Councillor Lackey.
Well said by Steve. The only other thing I would add to that is that any one-time or one-off projects, i.e. asset management plan, or let's finish the wayfinding.
Yeah.
We're leveraging reserve funds to fund those to keep it out of being impacting the tax rate. So in combination with really going lean on the actual budgets, anywhere we can, we are leveraging the reserve funds to not impact the tax rate as well. So it's, as Steve said, it's pretty lean. Yeah, it's
Okay.
we'll see how it turns out, but
Okay.
So you don't want to come back before council?
To go line by line,
Or no, I was talking about for the unexpected, unintended consequences of something happening.
well, we do have other reserves. That's why we do have contingency reserves and things like that. But we've leveraged them pretty heavily already for one time or projects, things like that nature. But yeah, the actual operating budget, yeah, there's not. It's pretty good.
Good.
So the CAO has a follow-up and then I'll go to Councillor Lackey.
So, Phil made an excellent point with the one-off projects. So every year we buy sand. We know we're gonna buy sand. Everybody knows we're gonna buy sand. Price of sand goes up. That's one that we bake into the tax rate because it's a recurring cost that we're gonna see every year. We're gonna buy sand, we know it. Project like, I don't know, pick something. That's a one-off.
The zoning thing for Marnie?
The zoning thing for Marnie, the
Zoning bylaw.
It's done once every 5 or 7 years. So that one, we don't need to increase taxes on an ongoing rate out to pay for that because it's a one-time thing, right? So that's, I think, the senior management team did a good job at identifying that this year. I know there's been chatter that we are using our reserve funds and to artificially keep our tax rate down. I don't think that that's the case at all. I think we're using the reserve funds for the intended purpose that we build them up over the years, is for these particular projects that are not a recurring thing.
Okay. Councillor Lackey, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Just a general question, because we've discussed water rate studies and the CAO just mentioned about service levels. Is there a requirement to do service level studies? Do we have to do one every few years, or do we know when the last one was done?
Go ahead.
So no, outside of the building department, which has a requirement to, when there's a request to do an inspection, it has to be done within 48 hours of the request, working day, like business days. But all the other service levels that the township, there's minimum maintenance standards that Dave's department has to meet for the roads, for different classifications of roads and all that sort of thing. But no, whether or not we have recreation programs is entirely up to council. Whether we, I don't know, where our participation in the community is the levels are set by council, how much we want to, allocate towards that stuff. So no, there's no set legal requirement for any particular thing outside of the building.
So I have Marnie's hand up. Marnie is joining us virtually this evening. So the Director of Planning, I'll recognize you, Director.
Thank you, through you. I just wanted to point out that there are established or required service levels under the
I
Planning
can't-
Act for timelines of
We
processing
can't hear
Planning Act
you, Ms.
applications.
Ndidi.
Sorry, you can't hear me?
I'm not sure why we can't hear you.
Oh,
Oh,
wait,
there we go.
can you
We
hear
got
me?
you now. Yep,
Can you hear me now?
we can. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, through you. I just wanted to point out that there are in fact established service requirements under the Planning Act in terms of timelines for processing of applications. So planning and building are both subject to legislated timeframes. The other thing I just wanted to note is that we are looking at our planning application fees in the context of other application or other municipalities as well right now. So we do have service standards that are legislated, as does building. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go to Deputy Mayor Fody. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Kind of a follow-up to Councillor Grell's comments. I'm kind of a news junkie, so I follow other municipalities. Just in generalization, from Quinte West to the Quebec border. And after our last budget meeting, and we're bouncing around 6% or slightly less, not knowing the county at that date, a lot of municipalities are in double digits, well into them, 12, 14, 15%. Now, they haven't passed their budgets that I'm aware of, but I don't see those 12 or 15% coming down to 5 or 6. I just don't. So kind of a similar vein to Councillor Grell's question, I'm thinking, how are we getting so low? Are we missing something here? And then my thought was that because we jumped on Kate Tyndall here at the time, because Dave Holliday was front and center of that as well, because we jumped on, or they jumped on the asset management plan, and thus the CAO's comments about putting money away in reserves. Is that the big difference, or is that too much of a loaded question? Is that what's kept us from boiling over into 12 and 15% ranges?
Go ahead. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Hard to say. It's been a funny year. I was reading about the township of Wilmot that staff presented a 50% increase.
Yeah.
Maybe unrelated. They're looking for a CAO at the moment. So, so who knows? But yeah, it is a funny year. I think the inflation rate had something to do with it. But there's no until you look in what's the state of their infrastructure and their capital and all that sort of stuff. It's hard to generalize. We all got hit with that OPP bill, which applied pressure to everybody. But I think it's a bad year, and things have been hitting. The asset management system, I'm glad we are where we are with it, because it has really informed our budgeting process. It's made it a lot easier, actually, because we look at the state of the assets and the condition, and we can forecast out, as far as you want to see, basically. And of course, as you get farther out, your information becomes fuzzier, so it becomes more of a guessing game and stuff. But it really does help us when we're doing our budget, particularly the capital budget, to determine what the priorities are and what our needs are. So Bill may have something.
I'll just put a bow on it. So under the AMP 2, starting at 25, the 2025 update to the AMP does include proposed levels of service, and you have to come up with a financial strategy for those proposed levels of service. So just speaking to what are our levels, that will become integrated specifically within the AMP, because they want to see if you have a certain proposed level to provide X, what resources do you need? Then how are you going to pay for it? So that's all coming through the OREG around the asset management plan. So that will all get integrated through the asset management plan as required by the province going forward.
I forgot about that, but yes, go ahead. Follow up, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you to the director, what kind of timeline is that? This year, next year?
The 2025 update would be summer 25 is the requirement, and then going forward, there is an annual requirement thereafter that every year an updated asset management plan has to come before council.
Luckily, we're already there.
We're getting there. You'll see an actual updated plan. So we had a bit of delay and a hiccup in ours, mainly related around to ARO. The 2024 update will be coming to council likely February, March. So we're going to get 2 this year, but as required. But yeah, and then it'll be on an annual basis thereafter.
Okay. Good question. Further comments in regards to that, the operating budget at this point? If not, we'll move on to the capital budget. Directors provide some slides and further explanation in regards to buildings and facilities, as well as other capital projects. So we'll go forward. Councillor Holiday. Or Councillor Holiday. Can tell that I started earlier this morning. I apologize, Director Holiday. Yeah, your salary has been diminished, yeah.
Thank you, through your worship. I just wanted to give a little additional bit of information on the capital projects for this year, some of the big ticket items that I know we had some concerns with. So overall, I'm focusing with this on the buildings and facilities, and then also the road projects. So the first one is that the fire station 1 and the municipal garage, $425,000. Second one being Escott Hall for $500,000 in 2025, and then the municipal office itself for $343,800. So the first one is the is the Public Works Garage and Fire Hall. We've identified some issues with the pillars just as a result of the salt that we're washing off the trucks and debris. I'm not sure how something like this occurs when you have treated pillars, but it has, and we have to address this before it becomes a safety issue. So we've engaged an engineer who's doing a design for us to have a look at this. And they're coming up with a plan, a long-term solution that this shouldn't happen again. The public sand facility is something that we've talked about for several years now, a couple of years, I guess. We had looked at a large facility, and just right now we're looking at maybe changing that we don't have to get building permits and approval through CRCA, and instead have more like a tote type thing that other municipalities have. So we're reviewing that currently, and it's something that we can actually get in place sooner rather than later. And then the parking lot, as everybody knows, we have it's a single lift of asphalt, and it is completely distressed in some areas. We have ponding. We have raveling, we have alligator cracking. It has come to the end of its useful life. But I think that there's some value in using that. So we're looking at possibly doing an overlay with a stress absorbing membrane interlayer to try to get that 425 down, and utilize that asphalt that's there currently as the base asphalt and putting a secondary lift on top. So the engineers are reviewing the cost benefit of doing that rather than 2 lifts. And we're hoping that that number can actually be reduced as a result of that. The second one being the Escott Hall archives. So this slide actually that's shown is from the 2024 capital budget, and we repurposed it for the 2025 capital budget. So this is what council saw about a year ago, with the plan for moving forward with this project. Some more details. We've been working based on that presentation. We did a report brought a council report through to council in March of 2024, where we discussed, I'm sorry, I have to move something here. Working on the Escott Hall, removing interior walls where right now it's just the interior wall against the back of the brick. There's no insulation. The HVAC system is working on and off. The roof is failing right now. The steel is coming up. The soffit and fascia is starting to fail. We have water infiltrating into the building. The ceiling on the second floor is starting to fall in. We have to do some repairs on the masonry. So we've been working away at this to try to move it forward. We finalized the design with the details. We got the heritage approvals. We've completed the archaeological study, and we've released a tender for that, which closed a couple weeks ago. In addition to that, we're looking at the Springfield house with just looking at the exterior, and that is for excavating and waterproofing the foundation, replacing damaged sill plates, repairing or replacing the windows and doors as required, and replacing the roof, and dealing with some of the drainage around the foundation itself.
Director Holiday, can I just stop you there?
Absolutely.
When you're talking about Springfield House, is that included in this 4,700? Or is that an additional?
It's a part of the big project, but the requirement to cover the cost for the Escott Hall is an additional $500,000. So we're following the plan that we laid out,
Okay.
where we're only looking for the additional $500,000 for Escott. We have sufficient funds to complete the project for Springfield.
Okay, I just wanted that clarity. Thank you.
Yep. No, thank you. So the tender did close. We received 6 bids, and they ranged from 1.188 million to 1.811 million. Ironically, that does include tax, and it is for both projects. So sufficient funds exist. Obviously, this is subject to budget approval and subject to council approval before we proceed with this project. But we wanted to close that tender in advance of any potential tariffs that might be imposed on this project. So we have numbers, we know what the numbers are in advance of budget being approved. That was always our goal.
And am I under the right assumption that the tenders, you said it's closed and you have a range and that it's less than what has been put in budget?
Correct. The,
Okay.
thank you. The low bid does fall underneath the budgeted amount for both projects.
Okay, so there's a potential savings there.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The additional project under buildings and facilities is the municipal office for $343,800. The exterior wall of this building, there is no waterproofing behind the facade, mainly where the dry stack brick is. But also I think where the siding was, the wood siding was previously as well, resulting in a lot of decay of the structure of the exterior walls itself. So there are sections where we're able to just pull chunks of the wood framing out from underneath windows, and that does pose a bit of an issue. So we need to address that. It's been identified by the engineers, and they are currently designing to address that. That I'm hoping will be the final issue with this facility that we can then move forward. Same thing in the front parking lot, single lift of asphalt that has come to the end of its useful life. Same thing, we're looking at the potential of utilizing the base asphalt to build on top of and creating or adding a SAMI again to mitigate any reflective cracking, which will elevate the parking lot and help for the water to shed away from it. So that's buildings and facilities. You guys, would
Does
you like to
anybody have
stop there
questions
and
for
speak with them?
buildings and facilities? Go ahead, Counselor Grow.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you.
I said Counselor Grow.
Oh,
Uh,
oh,
You're
sorry.
next.
Sorry.
You're next.
Paying attention.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Thank you. And through you, Your Worship, looking at the capital on page 58, the new additional budget proposal. There's $1 million in there, and it's spread amongst Escott Hall, 500,000. And this is the money that we did not get from the Trillium Foundation. Is that correct? We got zero in funding.
Thank you, through your worship. We have applied for the Trillium Fund. We do intend to apply for the Trillium Fund again. So we've applied once. We've applied for the Green Infrastructure Community Buildings Fund as well through the federal government, and we were also unsuccessful with that one.
Okay. In that you just bring that up, if I might ask, maybe I'm a little out of place here. On page 57, the Waste Reduction Diversion Project, I thought that was to be funded by the FCM under that green program, but I see we're into it for $750,000. Am I mistaken? I know that's not buildings right now. But
Okay,
you bring up the FCM. I thought that we had scored a lot of money from them on their greening project. And that's what I'm referring to there is page 57 of the budget binder.
Yes.
Waste Reduction and Diversion Project.
Yes, through you, Your Worship. Yeah, that project was in last year. We did get a grant for that. We got a grant for that, I believe. The FCM, that,
100,000, wasn't it?
yeah, a little more than that. And then the rest of it was also being funded through the Special Projects Reserve. Trying to remember how much we got.
Through your worship. So the FCM project for 750,000, we're at the initial stage of the feasibility study right now, which was up to $200,000, which they were funding 50 cent dollars on that. The total project, that's where we had the contractor come in and do the test pit holes at the Lansdowne waste site.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the feasibility study. The 750,000 includes the next phase of that as well, which is the and I apologize, it's the next phase. There's 3 phases to this project, and the next phase is the oh goodness, I do apologize.
Not remediation.
No, it's anyway, it's the next step. And it would be it's a pilot project, sorry. So the pilot project takes us up to the 750,000, and that is the next step with FCM as well. So we'd have to, once we have the feasibility study completed, which will come to council in February is what we're shooting for with the report from that, then we'll again apply to FCM to move on to the next phase if they see that it actually meets their requirement. So we're at step one, and then we go to step two, and the financial plan has contemplated both phase one and phase two in that $750,000.
So basically, of the $750,000, we are recovering some monies from FCM.
That is correct.
And the reason I'm getting that is because further down the road in this capital budget is that huge amount of money for the mining, which is directly related to that, correct?
That is correct.
So the more money we sink into that as sunk costs, the more we're going to get dragged into potentially. So I just want to be clear, how do we see what we're sinking into that? So that if we decided to back away from it, how much money have we committed? I guess we really don't know that quite yet because we don't know how much money we're going to get from FCM. Does that sound reasonable?
That is correct.
Sorry, I should look over at Phil. Give him some heat.
So
This is-
as of right now, that 750 is budgeted with $500,000 from FCM and 250 from the special projects reserve. That original 750
there
from
is-
last year's budget.
There is somewhere in here.
Yeah, that's
500?
carry forward from 2024. That's not speaking to that 2029, 2030. That's a
That's a
separate
whole other thing.
beast. But that
Yeah.
750 for that diversion pilot project, that's how it's budgeted to be funded,
Okay,
is basically 2/3 FCM, 1/3 us.
okay.
Through the special project reserve.
All right. Thank you for that. I guess then back to buildings here.
Sorry, can I?
So,
Yeah,
Can I
sorry.
add one more thing to that?
yeah, yeah.
I don't want to kill the surprise of it when it comes in March. But there is a significant amount of soil that has been found in the test pits. So I was out there on site and we've received the logs.
Mhm.
We don't have the report yet, but we know that anywhere from 50 to 85% of what they excavated was soil. And only about 10% of it was waste, household waste. There's recyclables mixed in there and all those kinds of things. So we see that there is a benefit to doing a mining project out there. And the benefit would be the alternative to not doing the mining project amounts to roughly $3 million per year in trucking alone.
So I'm gonna go to the CAO.
Yeah, if we don't do anything here. Dave, how long has Lansdowne got?
So as you get towards the end of the landfill, it does stretch a little bit as you start filling in pockets. But from the reports, we're looking at about 5 to 6 years, which is why the timing of doing this mining project in advance of the closure.
So in 5 to 6 years, we'll have to close Lansdowne. So there's closing costs associated with all that. There's ongoing monitoring, there's all that. And then Lansdowne would become a transfer station. And so the costs for trucking the volume of waste that we are currently taking at Lansdowne would equate in just having kind of a roadside conversation with a local contractor would run us about $3 million a year. That's just the transportation costs. Then you factor in the tipping charge per ton at wherever this waste is going to be accepted, whether it's in Morrisburg or somewhere in Northern Ontario or in Michigan, if Michigan's still accepting waste. So, and we lose control over what we're gonna have to pay whatever they're gonna charge us. So if everything comes back with this report from this pilot project and we find that we can buy ourselves years of capacity, it really just, if we get 1 year of capacity,
More than pays for itself.
we more than pay for the project. If we get 10 years of capacity, we're laughing. If we get 30 years of capacity, well, it's not going to be my problem because I'm not going to be alive, but it's wonderful if we can do this, right? Because, 5 years ago, I was told there hasn't been a landfill approved by the Ministry of the Environment for the last 10 years. So, now we're looking at 15 years without a new one. So it's going to be a real problem for us and every other municipality, barring any kind of miracle technology or somebody puts a multi-billion-dollar incinerator somewhere in Eastern Ontario.
That would be great.
That's what we're facing with the Lansdowne thing. If there's a capital project here that in my mind takes priority of everything, it's probably this one.
Okay. Did you have, sorry, you want to add more and then I'll go back to.
I just want to
Councillor
add one
Alfred.
more quick thing.
Sure.
There's currently a fund through the federal government, the CHIF fund. And they have identified landfills as one of these types of projects. And it's 50-cent dollars for up to $200 million projects.
It's say that again?
50 cents for every dollar for up to a $200 million project. So when the reason that we're pushing to get this report as quickly as we are is so that we can present this to you and get your blessing to proceed with a grant for that, rather than funding it through taxation, that we could get a grant to fund it instead.
Mhm. Okay.
Did you have any other questions about buildings?
Yes, just and it's more on page 58, it's about the new additional budget proposed. So there's carry forwards on some of these items, and then there's the additional. So and they're easy. Fire station number 1, installation of a clean room. It was budgeted at 100,000. Now we're looking for an additional 100,000 to bring it to 200,000 on page 58, the table at the top. Landfill purchase land. Okay, I got that. And Ivy Lee Wharf, Ivy Lee Wharf parking were additional this year, 200,000 to bring it to a total of about 235,000 odd. So, in 2024, we only budgeted like 100,000 for the clean room, and now we're 200,000. Is that
I'll go to the fire chief. Go ahead.
necessary?
Through your worship, when we originally put that in for 2024 budget, we were taking a look at what we were actually looking at. There was the clean room, and with the former manager of facilities, we looked at the possibility of doing some storage. I have 4 fire stations and I have closets for storage of extra equipment. So we took a look at what we had for 100,000, and we took that, and we can build basically it's like a little portable office space that will sit on the floor. But then when we were looking at it further, we looked and said, for storage reasons, we could put a mezzanine on top of that. There's a company that takes care of those, that they come in a mezzanine style with a portable office space underneath, which would satisfy our needs. So we looked at holding off on that because we didn't want to do one without the other. And that kind of satisfies us to be able to have that negative pressured room, which will help us keep our gear clean and out of the elements of the fumes from the trucks and the other outside atmosphere. And then using that mezzanine on top, would be able to keep some of our extra pieces that we have and be able to store those properly. And that was what the increase looked at under that
So
proposal.
the clean room isn't just a clean room, it's a clean room with a mezzanine.
With a mezzanine to
No.
storage.
And the parking lot you had a question about?
How do we arrive at the number? Can we do less? Can we trim that a bit and make it a simpler, or is that a pretty sophisticated parking lot?
So through your worship, we've been going through site plan approval with planning, including the Conservation Authority and the Parks Commission, if you can imagine, with the offsets to the parkway. So we do have some requirements for dealing with our stormwater drainage and dealing with the surface requirements and all of those types of things. So we have scaled it down. When we started out, it was $500,000 to build a similar parking lot, and that seemed quite extreme for the amount of parking spaces we were going to gain. So we've reduced it down to a single lift of asphalt, and then also trying to deal with the stormwater drainage on site. And that's what they come up with for their cost estimate from the engineers at this point.
As a priority, I do appreciate we want parking there and we want that to be workable and feasible. I noticed that parking, for instance, at the National Park down at Mallory Town, that's not paved, and yet they put lots of vehicles in there. And they used to put some striping down for trucks with trailers and stuff to delineate, but it wasn't paved, and I'm sure they didn't spend $500,000 fixing it. So is that an area that could be trimmed if we were asking for it to be trimmed from a little bit in the capital budget here?
So you're looking for gravel lot versus a paved
Yeah,
lot?
is that feasible? Is it something that we really don't want to do? Is it?
I will review this with the director of planning.
Okay.
She just sent me a response right now, says it does not need to be paved, but certainly we do need to consider accessibility at the same time. So whatever we do, we have to.
When you say accessibility, AOTA?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
As a municipal parking lot, we would have to consider that.
Mhm.
But there might be something that we can do to
Right.
reduce it, but at the same time.
Just asking.
Keeping in mind that this is not, if we weren't to do this, it wouldn't lower the tax rate. I just want to be clear on that. Or if we take this out of the capital plan, it doesn't lower the tax
So-
levy requirement?
Through you, Mayor. So
Or does
any changes to project, it just affects our reserve fund balances
That's right.
unless you
But-
do a corresponding cut to the contribution.
I just
account.
wanted
I
to.
appreciate that, but the 10-year plan has
Yep.
some weak points in it. So I was just looking for areas that might be looked at to trim back, because the capital 10-year plan, I'd say, it has those little bumps in the road there.
Well, exactly. So it would definitely, so for example, the 10-year plan next year, if we followed the plan exactly, calls for a 13% increase to the contribution to capital.
Yeah.
If we rolled back some projects, maybe you don't need 13% next year. Maybe we can get away with
Yeah.
10
So
or
if-
something. Yeah.
So if Dave can get us $100,000 parking lot instead of a $200,000 parking lot, we could flatten that curve a little bit.
Yeah. Every bit helps.
Okay.
Just to put a bow on this is Phil, can I ask you one question here? On the capital requirement sheet here, this one, which would be, doesn't have a page number, but it's the first page.
Is it capital?
Yeah, capital requirement. And on the Lansdowne mining project, this confused me, just rolling across here to the year 2029. It says $10 million. And yet I haven't read $10 million elsewhere. So did I misinterpret something? I thought we were looking at,
So this is the capital financial plan?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
at the top,
this
and
is-
then
Yeah.
it's the first page?
tab
Yeah.
8, yeah.
Yeah.
So in the 10-year,
Yeah.
we spread it over 2 years. It's kind of high level at this
Yeah.
point. So there's the 10 in 2029 and another 5 in 2030.
Yeah.
15 total. And the way it's built into the plan is that 50% would potentially be funded through the grant
Oh,
that Mr. Holliday spoke to earlier. And the other, so it is in a separate line on that same page. If you look at the funding strategy,
Down
it
bottom.
shows up as it's basically proposed to be funded 50% through debt and 50% through a grant.
okay. And that's down under bridges and facilities, or where am I looking?
Nope, it is.
Oh, the funding strategy, excuse me. Yeah.
So
All right.
if you look on the funding strategy under debt and then grant other, so that's the grant other.
Okay.
So if you see in 2029 and then debt above it, there's 500,000 debt, 500,000 grant other, and then 2.5. So that's the 50-50 potential funding.
Okay.
with the
And
grant.
while I'm on that page, then, if I might, under buildings and facilities, right, bottom debt and grant, coming right across the middle there, is 5 million in 2029 and 2.5 million in 2030.
Yep, that's for that project as well, yeah.
Okay. Where in that is fire hall number 4? which we've been budgeting for years.
Yeah, so
Where's that to be found there?
Yep, no, so it's, if you look under the building as well in debt, if you look at the 2024 projected actual column, we have 4 million and then 2.319 in the carry forward to 25. So that total together, that's 6.3.
You're talking
No,
about, he's talking about Station 4, not
Station-
Station 2.
Oh, that's the other one up. So that has been, for the time being, that's not included within this 10-year.
Okay, so that's been shelved. That was my impression. I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
So we have shelved which has been in every budget for the last 2 or 3 years, but that's gone now in their budget, because my point is going to be, there's one that we've taken it off this paperwork here, and that 10-year projection still looks pretty tough. And yet we just casually said, oh, we won't deal with that fire hall. Well, we've been told for how many years and put it in the budget, and it's been sitting there like an egg. $5.2 million. We just spent $7 million building fire hall number 2.
Two.
And so now we've just disappeared. So if we were to consider it, look what it's going to do to our debt structure. It's not even in the debt structure. It's not even mentioned in the debt structure. I find that, I looked at that this week and I went, I must be missing the point. But it's gone from this plan here. I think we need to give ourselves a little shake there, because it's been mentioned for year after year in the fire plan and everything. And I'm all in favor if we want to just say it's not there, but let's be honest and say it has been. And now it's gone.
Maybe
I find that very curious.
maybe I can add part to that or part of an answer to that question. I think what it comes down to is that station number 4 is used as a training facility, but also as a fire station. There's a larger conversation to be had, and I know that I've had these conversations with our fire chief, to be had with other municipalities about what is required to be done and where things are located. Currently, where Station 4 is on the west side of the Village of Lyndhurst versus on the east side versus where the station is in Delta, where the station is in Athens. There's bigger conversations to be had. And so at this point, I think until these conversations are had by our fire chiefs and our CAOs, then we maintain the building we have until a new plan presents itself at this point. But as far as building a brand new facility within how many kilometers, chief? Are the two of the, is 6 or 8 kilometers of each other? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Okay, I'm pleased that that's an acknowledgement that perhaps that in the, that it's not going to be considered, because the other unknown external would be the, that isn't in here. And I'm referring to the 10-year plan. And I appreciate we've been presented with a very good budget binder, very easy to follow. However, another little surprise would be the Sealy's Bay Community Hall. There's nothing in there as to what we might be looking forward to, because we haven't been presented with any ideas yet. But that's going to be one of those additional debt items. Sure as heck.
Go ahead, Treasurer.
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, and just speaking to Sealy's Bay Hall, so included in the budget is that visioning project.
Yeah,
And the expectation is,
100 and some thousand.
I would expect coming through that visioning project, it will present to council the options of what you want to do going forward. So you make a good point. What will we do with that building? I would say that built within this 10-year would include regular replacement of the existing assets. I'd have to go look to see, because it is, that asset is within citywide. So if the windows are done in 8 years, that would be picked up in here. So those kinds of things.
So maintenance of the existing structure remains in.
Capital replacement of the existing structure as is would be picked up within the 10-year, but anything above and beyond that is not included in this. Exactly.
So if there was a whole rebuild, it would be.
Yeah.
Well, rebuild or repurpose.
Yeah.
So just, if I might, and then I will sit and be quiet. Page 66 on the annual capital requirement, and it's the color bar code. So in the years 20, 25 and 26, we have the red stuff, which would be yeah, bridges and culverts red and Lansdowne urbanization.
Urbanization.
And then the next big jump, because we eliminated the fire hall, it's going to be the Lansdowne mining project. So we've replaced one for the other there. And I see that buildings and facilities is pretty slim. In there, you know, it's the gray, very, very slim. So really the two projects that have taken over are Lansdowne urbanization and the Lansdowne mining project. Fair to say? Nothing wrong with that. It's just that I want us to be aware of what we're looking at here. And that, again, it excludes these 3-year or more discussions about fire halls and in that time frame, 2028, 930. Are we going to be required to be doing something in Lyndhurst? Millions of dollars of work in 2029, 2930 because of the fire study that was done? It seems like that's just gone away. I think we need to be very cautious in our thinking here. And I know it's just a plan. And as Phil has beautifully written, it is just an estimate. But there is something there. There are a couple items there that might just be reported back saying, hey, we need a few $1 million for additional work here. So what do we do with that? Anyway, just bringing it to the highlight and I'm done. Thank you.
So any further comments in regards to building and facilities? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through, I want to go back to Escott and Springfield House. 2024's budget wasn't utilized, all but shy of $30,000 because of a number of holdups. With your bids that you've received just recently, does that mean we have no holdups to finish out those two buildings this year based on what's proposed?
Thank you, through your worship. The tender contemplated the work all being completed by September of 2025
On both?
on both projects.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further comments or questions in regards to building and facility? Go ahead, Councillor Lackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been struggling a bit with, as Councillor Grell indicated on page 58 with some of these projects. Again, Ivy Lee Wharf being one of them. That's a bit of a stretch considering just down the road, there's one about 10 times the size that's about 50,000 less than what's indicated here for us. Granted, different level of service, I guess. Going to Ascot Rockport, Ascot Springfield and the garage, I'm looking at needs and wants more than anything. The Lansdowne urbanization, same thing. We need it. But do we need it all at once? Is there a way we have to do the wastewater study, which indicates that we're going to be tearing up some streets? And then part of the urbanization is the rest of them. Is there a way through the, Your Worship, to the director that we can share some of that gradually over the next 4 or 5 years rather than 2, as far as doing a couple of streets a year? Is there a disadvantage?
Thank you, through your worship. Subject to the approval of the grant, because when we applied for the grant, it was for these sections of road south of King Street, the entire south end of the village. If we're not approved for that, and that is, as well is subject to council approval before we sign on the dotted line with them. But subject to that, or aside from that, certainly we could piece off one road at a time. What needs to be considered is the outlets of the storm. You always start at your outlets and you work up so that you have that infrastructure in place to capture as you build the other roads. You do pay more when you pay less overall for a larger project than you do for a smaller project. There's economies in scale. But certainly, for something of this size, personally, I think that this is a project that should be subject to a grant approval. It's a large project, and it's a lot for us to bite off at once. I agree with that. And it could be shrunk down in little pieces at a time. We will pay more, like I said, for each section of road to do them one at a time. And it will take longer, but certainly you could do that.
Thank you for that. And as well, how are we keeping track of what we approve based on capturing these grants? It's nice to sit here and say, well, you know, these numbers are based on getting 500,000 or 50-cent dollars from this level of government and that level of government. That's, I guess, wishful thinking because we have not been successful in the past. I hope that changes for us. I currently don't, any of the ones that we have based on receiving funding, I don't believe we shouldn't do them unless we have the funding.
So to that motion that we talked about previously, that's exactly what we're looking for, is a motion that states the council is for all intents and purposes, not approving, but endorsing this project. However, it cannot go ahead without provincial or federal funding or both.
Exactly. I would like to complete the needs before the wants.
Okay, so that will be identified in a motion at council next week. If everybody is kosher with that. Any other comments or questions in regards to buildings and facilities? I know we've been at this for 2 hours, so we'll get through the road network and stormwater, and if there's no further questions, then I'll call the question, but otherwise we'll take a comfort break. I realize that people might be floating at this point, so go ahead with road network.
Thank you. So with road network and stormwater, there really are two projects. There's the Rockport Village project, and then there's the Lansdowne urbanization project. So the first one being the Rockport Village project. We've broken this project into phases. With phase one, we're looking at doing Old River Road and Birches Lane. And it's just Old River Road within the village boundaries itself, not all the way out to where it ties back into the parkway. We had hosted a PIC and heard loud and clear that north of the parkway, they were not looking at sidewalks. So the updated design contemplates that cross section without the sidewalks. And that's what we're moving forward with. We are futurifying this project, if that's a word. Just putting safeguards in place, making sure that we have the right of way so that in future, if there's a need identified for sidewalks, we're making sure that we're positioning the road to be able to accommodate that, but certainly not putting it in at this time. And dealing with the stormwater drainage that comes off our road.
And the Birches Lane, which is that piece between Old River Road and the Parkway, that
That is correct.
dip that's been in need of some love for a bit.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Councilor Groh.
Just a quick question, and through you, your worship, the number then, Dave, 1.1 million, was that a number that was presented with the engineering firm there from Toronto? Or is this sort of an updated number without sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera?
Thank you. Through your worship. This number was actually generated from the asset management plan based on our unit rates from other projects that we've done. So we up that year after year, and this is what's come out of the asset management plan directly. We have not received an update from the consultants at this point because we haven't finalized
Okay,
the
so
design.
that we haven't received the update yet from them. So this would be like, what's the expression we've been using? Replacement in kind?
A replacement cost, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Fody, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Through you. Question. From Rockport Hall through to the east side of Birches Lane, does that current Old River Road have the width to facilitate what you're proposing here?
Yes, that is correct. So we've looked at the width of the right of way. If I was able to zoom in on this picture, you'd be able to see what the right of way is. So we made sure that it fit within the right of way, but also that we minimize the amount of trees that we had to disrupt. Because it is pretty well established, the tree network there, and it gives some character to the road. So we didn't want to interrupt that as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further comments about Rockport? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, and the last one is the Lansdowne urbanization project. So with this, we're looking to introduce the standard cross sections with the curb and gutter, with the sidewalks, as well as the storm water. introducing stormwater management, catch basins and manholes and all the piping underground and treatment facilities. So that's the surface, dealing with everything on the surface. In addition to this, we included in the tender or in the RFP when we hired the consultant to deal with sanitary spot repairs. And I apologize, I just have to pull up my notes here. So with the sanitary spot repairs, the one on the bottom, there were a total, you can't see it in the picture, there were a total of 79 sanitary spot repairs that need to be completed currently with a severity scale of 1 to 5. In 1 being the least severe and 5 being the most severe. On number 1, we have 5. We have on number 2, we have 33. In a severity scale of 3, we have 34. 4 being the higher, we have 7, and then we have 0 under the 5. So 79 sections of pipe currently that need to be repaired. The cost for this project does not contemplate the replacement of this sanitary. And with this being asbestos concrete or asbestos cement, that would drastically increase the cost of this project. So it's something that we feel that is a need that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later, so that we're not replacing this pipe, because it is you have to do abatement when you remove this, and it's a bit of a to-do. That is
This was the gift from the province in 76 it was built, and it was given to us in 90 something.
What's that? What was?
The
given?
water sewer system was
Oh.
put in by the province in
Right.
76 or 78, I think. Anyways, in the late 70s, but then it was turned over to the municipality to maintain in the 90s, I believe.
Correct.
So it's a gift that really gives.
While we're on sanitary, if I could just add that the lagoons had never been cleaned out before 2021.
The lagoons had never been cleaned out before 2021.
Correct, according
On-
to Aqua. They did not have a record of the
Super
lagoons ever
Cam.
being cleaned out.
Give 'em a call.
And they estimate that the Anti-Zyme project will add approximately 10 years of life to the lagoons.
Okay. So I've got Councilor Rowe and then Deputy Mayor Fode.
Yeah, thank you again through you, your worship. And Dave, I sort of apologize in advance, but is there anything in the Lansdowne urbanization project, the way it's been presented and the way it's come back to us, is there any way like, can you eliminate the sidewalks and reduce cost? Is there any way to save money on that? Or is it sort of like that's the way it has to be? Because it is a tremendous amount of money. It's $15 million.
So through your worship, the design that's being presented, it contemplates dealing with stormwater drainage that currently travels across private property.
Yep.
And that's why we have to have the curb and gutter. You know, for accessibility, we have to have the sidewalks. We currently don't have that in place. We have sidewalks, but it's not continuous. It ends on one side of the road and starts up on another and
Mhm.
ends there, and nothing picks it up on certain roads.
Haphazard at best.
It is
Mhm.
haphazard, thank you. With no real consideration for those that need to use it. So certainly we could rebuild what's there with its replacement, like for like, and the asset management plan does consider that. It doesn't contemplate the upgrades, and that's where you see the additional cost is, you know, to put storm sewers in the ground, you have to break into the ground to apply, you know, be able to put the runs in, and that's expensive. But what it does is it deals with all of the water that should be contained within our own right of way that currently goes on private property. And water doesn't have a right of access, so that does create a bit of a problem for the municipality. So we're trying to address that with this urban cross section to keep our water on our road, you know, similar to ditches on the roadsides. In an urban setting, you have to you know, do something other than ditches because they take so much space. And that's why you introduce storm sewers, which currently don't exist in the village.
And final question on that. The county kind of dissects the village with Prince Street and was it 30?
Prince and King.
King. Would we need them to participate also, or can we what's already there? Would it influence our work? In other words, do we have to tap county and say, hey, we need you to step up to the plate here?
That is a great question, and it's a conversation that I had with our engineers before I went on holidays. Looking at the way that the topography flows and the elevations from one side of the village to another, and how we try to capture all that stormwater. At some point, we will have to intersect with the county to deal with our stormwater. And I did have preliminary conversations with the county back before we started this project, and they're, you know, what the requirements are for us to be able to do that. And as a result, we're trying to avoid it as much as possible. But certainly there are some locations where it's unavoidable that we're going to have to work with the county. This has an impact on our CLI ECA. It's our linear infrastructure approvals for stormwater. It's the new system in place, and where we share a system with the county, it's actually a joint CLI ECA. So this will tie in, once we tie everything in, then it will become part of a larger system that needs to be considered as a whole.
It's a lot. Anyways, Deputy Mayor.
Your
Go
worship,
ahead.
did you want to interject with
No,
an
I
answer
don't
from the
wanna-
county?
I'm good. You go ahead.
My question is, you had, Director of Operations, you had indicated if we have to deal with the asbestos piping, should it be asbestos, it'd be seriously expensive. What's the translation? You're gonna put in new stormwater and circumvent that, like tie in where you have to, but otherwise leave it alone? Is that the plan?
Yes, through your worship. Our intent is to do spot repairs on the existing that's in place. As long as you don't break the material itself, then, and you can, well, Counselor maybe would know this probably better than anybody in the room. We can do things to extend the life of that asset without breaking the material itself. And that's what we're trying to avoid is having to break that material, because once you do, then you're into a mitigation situation where the costs, they definitely do escalate at that point.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And through you, I did have a question as they came up. And yes, I do know a lot about this particular subject, but was there a scope done of the existing drains to find the condition of the asbestos-borne piping?
The scope that you did, the level 1 to 5,
The
that
camera.
was based on a scope, was it not?
Camera scoping.
Yes, thank you. Through your worship. Actually, it's completed by Aqua on an annual basis. So we were able to get that information from Aqua.
Mhm.
They do a quarter of the system every year. So every
Yes.
4 years, we have a fresh round of cameras. And the consultant went back and reviewed the last 2 rounds for all of the sections, and then compiled it on a map for us to be able
Yep.
to share that.
Did they find any of the piping in desperate need of being replaced as in the asbestos removal?
Through your
That would be
worship.
the 1 to 5, would it?
Yeah, some of the more severe,
Zero,
I would
right.
say that the level 4s were likely, I did see some sections in there where it said that there were objects protruding through the surface of the pipe. So that obviously would require that we have to
Yeah.
open it up and be
Fix
able to
that.
get in there and replace them.
Fix that. Okay. And then the other consideration is when you're doing sidewalks, curbs and such, the actual grade of the neighboring property, whether it's private, and how that grading is going to interfere with their water escaping down a storm sewer.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. That is one of the big considerations and challenges that we've had is not creating a bowl with the residual property that we're not considering as part of the design.
Yeah.
And our engineers have done a really good job of picking that up, whether it's introducing a yard basin to capture that and put it into the storm sewer system or other means.
Yes.
We did have a rather lengthy discussion about that
Yeah.
and what their views were on how we could address that.
Complex grading is definitely needed there. Yep. And basically all of it. The AODA one talked about integration of that. Does that include the tactile strips being placed at all the corners?
Yes, all new sidewalks, you are required to have the tactile surface
Yeah.
at where it meets an intersection of a road.
Yeah. And it's better to have it inset into the concrete at the time.
Correct.
Yes. speaking from. yes, thank-
from experience.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any further comments or questions in regards to the road network projects, capital projects? Go ahead, Councillor Graf.
And thank you for your indulgence. And through you, year after year, we seem to put in $500,000 for the gravel road upgrades. And I know, or I've heard numbers, because we have so many gravel roads, we could spend 50 million. It strikes me that we don't put enough money toward year after year after year. And yet we have these other projects booming along here, and our debt level is increasing rapidly. And year after year after year, we only put in $500,000. It strikes me we could do better in the gravel areas. I have a lot of gravel in my ward, and I know there's a lot of gravel elsewhere. And year after year after year, we get complaints. I know some of those roads are a lot easier to resurface than others. But do we ever consider bumping that up?
To a resurface versus gravel?
If,
Or
gravel
just
road
increasing the
upgrades. I think
just
it's called
increasing
dual
the-
surface. Is that it?
Yes.
Dual surface treatment?
Thank you. Yeah, double surface treatment. That's
Yeah,
right.
see? Yeah. Pay
Um,
attention.
Thank you through your worship. We've had this discussion internally with the operations staff, you know, for the benefit of, with the $500,000, that seems to be the sweet spot for our group to be able to reconstruct the roads. And I know we're not contractors, but certainly there's no markup. The staff enjoy doing that type of work. And that seems to be the sweet spot that we can handle. Anything beyond that, then our level of service seems to decline on other aspects of our project, or our tasks, whether it's roadside ditching, or if it's gravel road grading, or those types of things. You know, once we exceed that, then we seem to suffer in other areas. So that seems to be roughly the sweet spot where we'd like to be, where they feel comfortable being in. And anything beyond that, we'd have to outsource that, and you'd tack about 50% on to the cost that we're constructing it for.
How many kilometers does $500,000 get you these days?
For about 2.5 kilometers. This year, with what we're proposing for a paved road, it's less. But it is less. It's not less. So it's 1 kilometer of asphalt on Washburn Road will absorb most of the costs. And then because of the work that we've done, similar to with Dirial Road, where we were able to do 3.4 kilometers last year, it was because of the work that we had done the previous year. And we're looking to focus on Kidd Road South from Fairfax to Eden Grove, where we've already done the ditching, we've already done most of the graveling, and it's just putting a surface on. So that allows us to do that as well.
So there's going to be an upgrade to a surface treated potentially in 2026 for Kidd Road North. Is that what you just said?
So Kidd Road North, we believe that there's sufficient funding with $500,000 to pave the section of Washburn Road
Right.
and surface the section of Kidd Road from Eden Grove to Fairfax, because the base work and the ditching has already been
It's already
completed.
been done.
Yep.
So you're talking about upgrading roads that are currently just gravel, or,
Correct. 2
Correct.
roads. Yes.
and that's included or contemplated in that budget that he's speaking of.
That is correct.
Okay.
Just to paraphrase that, then, to be clear, $500,000 is when we do it in-house. That's a number that is feasible because of the workload.
That is
really.
correct.
And if we were to go outside the in-house, we could not double it, but would be adding 50% more per unit. That's what I heard.
That's correct. You'd be looking at about 50% more to do the same amount of work that we do in-house.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Foddy.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Thank you to Councillor Grell for bringing up a real sore spot for, I'm sure, Councillor Kelman and myself. For those of us who do live on gravel roads, we appreciate the effort by the Works Department on best they can do, because it's inevitable some days you're going to grade a road and it's going to rain 2 inches of rain within 48 hours, and there goes the whole project. I think something we're overlooking, I had brought this personally up with Director Holiday earlier this summer. I think we have to look at a couple of roads that are dangerous. as opposed to the condition of the road. Sand Bay Road is one, Black Rapids Road is another. I'm sure I may be missing a few, but I'm talking roads that have a number of blind curves, blind hills. It was brought to light just a few weeks ago when I saw two large vehicles both slide to a stop, and we're about from here to Counselor maybe from each other from connecting. And that was because of a blind curve, seriously blind. I would say if this room is 70 feet long, you might have 50, 60 feet of vision. And if you're traveling 40 kilometers an hour in a fuel truck and you got that momentum after you hit the brake, I would like to see the staff, when they have the time, and asset management would likely show some of that. Take a look at the more dangerous roads we have and see if we can chop corners off. I've joked with my neighbors. They said it used to be the case where you get a neighbor on council and your road's paved miraculously within a year or two. I said, I realize that, and I'm sorry I failed to do that for you and or myself. But I said, I would seriously like to see the quality of road or the danger eliminated where we can. The flip side of that is the minute you start taking corners off our road, it goes from an IndyCar track to a flat out Michigan speedway. And, so it's a fine line, but at the same point, there's more to roads, especially gravel roads, than the quality of the road. And that's the safety aspect. And I don't think we have too many roads in our township that I can recall that are dangerous roads. But I will say Sand Bay Road and Black Rapids, the north section of Black Rapids from Sand Bay through to County Road 3, there's some seriously dangerous curves up in there. And if you're new to the area and you're just driving along on a Sunday drive and wonder where this road takes me, it may take you directly to your insurance company.
Okay, so we've gone through all the buildings, facilities, and road projects. Are there any further questions in regards to the capital projects? If not, I'm going to go back to the main motion and call the question. I have no hands up. So I would just like to say thank you to the staff for providing the additional information that we received tonight and the additional conversation that was around the horseshoe, because none of us take this lightly. There's a lot of money at stake, but more importantly, this is the roadmap that we set. So go ahead before I call the question.
Yes, thank you. And I apologize. John Deere tractor mower for $400,000.
The
Of
rubber
a
tire excavator.
Rubber tire excavator. That is $400,000. That's a couple of percentage points on a budget. We have a lot of good equipment, new equipment. Can we buy used? Can we go to Ritchie's?
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, through your worship. So another little trade secret. We are hoping that acquiring this piece of equipment will actually save us a lot of money in the long run.
You're good.
No, he's very
from my
true.
own personal experience. A rubber tire excavator is something that makes you money. It's really the only piece of equipment that we have that makes the money. From my own experience, we contract out currently our ditching, we contract out our culvert replacements, we contract out our roadside brushing. And this is all something that I feel we can do in-house. So if we have the right piece of equipment, then we're going to reduce our contracted services for all of those different aspects. And it's going to be a 12-month of the year piece of equipment rather than the tractor, which is a 6-month of the year piece of equipment. That's what we're trying to achieve. We get the ditching bucket, we get the rock bucket, we're able to take the corners off, but we're also able to brush when the leaves are off the trees. Because what I hear is we're butchering the trees in the summertime when the leaves are on. And so it's more beneficial for us to do it when the leaves are off, and the contractors, they don't want to be doing it in the middle of the winter. So that's our sweet spot, where when we're not snow plowing, we can be out brushing. And then once we hit the spring, we're going. We're ditching, we're putting in the culverts, and we're seeing things happening. So
But we are also using this to replace the tractor that it's at its end of life, correct?
That is correct. The tractor has been identified as being at the end of its useful life. So we're taking that money that we would have bought another tractor for the same cost and buying this other piece of equipment instead, which, like I said, will save us money in the long run.
And I assume it has many attachments, 3 or 4 attachments come with it.
That's correct.
Crusher.
Is
Yeah,
that the other idea?
we would buy it with the ditching bucket. We would buy it with the rock bucket. We would buy it with the brush head.
Hmm.
And then it comes with the dozer blade as well.
And how confident are we about the price?
We've received quotes already and we're spot on.
Well, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, just to Councillor Grell's comments about places like Ritchie Brothers, it's a real crapshoot. We transport for a number of people out of Ritchie Brothers and to Ritchie Brothers, and I can think of a classic example with a payloader just a couple of years ago, and they sold their old payloader. I don't know what they got for it. I really don't know, and they bought a much better one. Within 6 months, we were moving it back to Ritchie Brothers. I suspect it wasn't because it was in great shape. I found out later the motor was gone in it. It was just drinking oil more than it was drinking diesel. But I mean, there are some great buys to be had at Ritchie Brothers. We've been involved with a number of them, but it is a risk. If you're buying 5 highway tractors, for instance, you'd be happy if you get 3. If you get 5, you're really scored. But it's a risk factor. You have to be prepared to pay the difference of the shortcoming.
I'll let you have the last word and then I'm calling the question because we might actually have people float out of this room. Okay, go
Thank you,
ahead.
through your worship. As part of this, we are looking at demo units as well to try to reduce that cost further. So consideration for that, instead of buying new, if there is a deal out there, then we're looking for it.
Okay, with that, I'm going to call the question, the motion that is at hand. So do you want me to read the motion again or are we good? Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and it is carried. Thank you, thank you, thank you to the staff who have taken the extra time to make sure that we were very well educated in regards to this. I know it's a long night and I apologize for not giving everybody a break. That's 100% my fault. And where's my, sorry, unfinished business. There's no unfinished business. And other business. No other business. Notices of motion. Mr. Lackey will work on the notice of motion for funding for provincial and federal governments in regards to these large projects. Okay. Mayor's update. Yeah. So I'll try to make this as brief as possible. Happy New Year to everyone. Hope you had a great holiday. I hope that 2025 is everything that you hope for and that you have all the health possible. I participated in the New Year's levy at the Gananoque Legion and was also asked to attend Brockville's levy and Prescott's levy as the warden for the United Counties. All really great ways to start the year. Lots of great stuff coming up. I know that there are many events, which if you would please go to our social media and our website will be outlined there. But there is probably one of the most special things that I will probably have the pleasure of announcing here at council. There's a very special ceremony that will be happening on January the 19th, I believe. 18th, January 18th, sorry, in the city of Ottawa, honoring one of our very dedicated community members with the King Charles III medal, coronation medal, and Wayne Shields, one of our firefighters and dedicated community volunteers, will be honored by members of the federal government, and the Governor General, I believe, actually does that. I'm very disappointed that I will not be able to attend to witness this absolutely wonderful ceremony. We will be headed to Roma that particular day, and it is happening, I believe, in the Senate chambers on Parliament Hill. So congratulations to Wayne, and you know, just very important and auspicious thing to be awarded and somebody in our community. So if you happen to see Wayne out and about, please give him all of our best. And we look forward to seeing wonderful photos. I know that there's some individuals coming from the township to attend with him, so along with his family. And any other, go ahead, Councillor Grau, if I've missed any announcements.
No, I'm sorry, it's not so much an announcement, but I don't know if I need to wait till next week. I'll be stepping down from the CRCA board, and that would leave a
A vacancy.
position there. And they are coming up in their next meeting later this month, and they would be appointing various committees if someone wanted to participate in those committees. It is a reasonably heavy agenda that they put on, but it can all be done. It is done in the evening, and it is, you can be electronic. You can go Zoom meetings. But I'll be stepping down after my year there, and look forward to someone else taking the reins.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the notice. Any other notable events that somebody needs to identify? I see none, so I'll put the motion on the floor for adjournment, moved by Councillor Kelman, seconded by Councillor Garrell, that Committee of the Whole adjourn at 8:55 PM. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it is carried. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.